Baldur's Gate 3 has a lot of items, thousands in fact, ranging from the godly powers of the Titan String Bow and Helldusk armor, all the way down to the very bad starting equipment. It gives the player almost no armor and very basic weapons, that deal only small amounts of non-magical damage, but feats and class abilities exist to allow your pathetic 1 to 8 damage longsword to deal up to 50 damage, which compared to the real worst item, is massive. The lowest damage weapon in Baldur's Gate 3 is a dagger, doing a miserable 1 to 4 damage. But despite that, it's still usable and viable, and there exists a variety of items and passives to allow its damage to scale massively. It also has its uses, being able to be thrown, dipped, and even interacted with objects. They can also be found everywhere, and even enemies in the final act of the game use them. But it's not the worst item. The worst item would have to have pathetic damage or viability, be actively harmful to you and your allies, be very hard to get, and useless when you do. The worst item in the entire game is without a doubt the Water Sparkers. If you even know what this item is, you likely picked it up, realized just how useless or actively harmful it was to you and your party, and immediately sold it or had Gale consume it, despite it being one of the first rare items you can find in the game. All the boots do is electrify water, and enemies stepping on electrified water take 1 to 4 lightning damage once a turn. This also only works when creatures move while on electrified water, and half of them will just stand still if they have range attacks, making it useless against them. This also forces you to stand still to avoid being electrocuted, and standing still in BG3 is never a good idea. This will also require you to waste all your spells on creating water to take on one single fight. Almost nothing scales with the Water Sparkers, and any other surface will completely override its abilities and stop the electricity from spreading. This item sucks. And it gets worse. Half of the enemies in the game are hovering enemies, like shadows and imps, which means the only way of killing them would be to throw the boots at them over hundreds of combat rounds. This is because boots are one of the few items that, if thrown, deals only 1 damage with no strength bonus, and almost nothing scales with that either. Keep in mind that this is also non-magical damage despite the boots being magical. So, I decided to beat Baldur's Gate 3 with my only source of damage being from the Water Sparkers. This would require me to completely dismantle the entirety of Baldur's Gate 3, using every possible broken mechanic in the game to maybe beat the game with Baldur's Gate 3's worst combat item. Now for the rules. Because I hate myself, I will be playing the entire game on honor mode, but I will allow reloads to earlier sections of the game. I will almost always use one character, except for some small sections in the game that are vital to the success of the run. In the entire game, the only way I can deal damage is either by shocking foes with the Water Sparkers, or making an attack that uses the Water Spark, like throwing or crushing with the boots, to name a few. Now, let's begin. For race, we importantly pick Dwergar for the permanent invisibility at level 5, and for class, there is only one real option. Remember, without the Water Sparkers, I can't deal any damage, so I go with Cleric, as it starts with Sanctuary, and has access to create water. For Domain, we importantly go with Trickery, for access to disguise self. Now we just need a name for our character. We start the game and head straight over to Lae'zel. We make sure to dash twice before entering the fight, and Lae'zel decides to go to Lay Hell. With Sanctuary, we're able to run past all the fights, and activate the Transponder to send us into Act 1. We talk to Shadowheart, and this gets us level 2. Since I can't fight anything, I talk to all the companions, making sure to grab Gale as insurance for later. Once at the Grove, I ran and hid in a corner, waiting for the humans and goblins to battle each other to the death, entering the Grove after Zevlor killed the final enemy. We talked to Aaron and bought the Rain Dancer from him, which gives a level 1 Create Water once per short rest. Yep, we definitely bought it from him. We also grabbed some Hill Giant Strength Potions from Ethel, and the Safeguard Shield from Dammon for a +1 to all saves. We make sure to save Arabella, and steal the Druid's Idol for Mole by just returning to camp the instant we pick it up, as to not anger the Druids. As per every challenge run, we head and collect the Parasite from Edwin, and using our Disguise Self spell to turn into a Drow, we get past all the goblins and reach level 3. We also grab Scratch, as he will be mandatory for later, and beeline straight to the Goblin camp. Our disguise gets us into the camp, where we get branded by Priestess Gut, as this may provide some benefits later in the game. Now we just need to get the Water Sparkers, located in this chest next to Minthara. Picking it up is not an option, as it results in combat, but dragging the chest doesn't. Enemies will never attack you if you drag items. However, they will attempt to run up to that item and pick it up. So, we have to keep dragging the chest, as Minthara will try to pick it up. But eventually, we get it next to the space that isn't considered a stolen object, and put the entire chest into it. successfully collecting the chest and the water sparkers. Damage has successfully been acquired. We speak to Gut, and she slaps the shit out of us before getting shanked by Corilla. We obtain the parasite and then spend the next 15 minutes casting Create Water all around the Goblin camp, for a nice lightning surface once combat starts. We don't have all the items we need, so we head into the Whispering Depths, sneak past all the spiders, to jump down into the pit and enter the Myconid colony. We take all their items, and accept Umalum's quest to get the mushrooms from the Arcane Tower. We take our first long rest, which then allows us to consume parasites we've collected, giving us access to Cull the Weak, which allows any enemy reduced to 3 health or less to instantly die. Reaching the tower, we use an invis pot to skip the turrets, and read the book to have Bernard just give us the light ring, granting us access to the basement. While I'm here, why not subscribe to the channel and like the video, as we're trying to hit 7,000 subscribers. It is completely free, and it helps me out a ton. YouTube says only 6% of you guys watching are subscribed, so help me out, will you? As I mentioned before in previous videos, my computer has been massively struggling, and I've started a computer fund to help get a new one at some point, so make sure to stick around to find out a way to help support me. Now, back to the video. Entering the basement, we obtain the Sparks Wall, which not only gives lightning resistance, but immunity to electrocution, allowing us to freely walk in electrified water. Returning to Umalum, we succeed the saves to get Survival Instinct, a very useful Lithid power, and steal the Pearl of Power from him for another free Create Water once per long rest. With all we needed from the Underdark for now, we headed back into the Blighted Village and bring Astarion into our party. We then trigger Raphael with my character and have Astarion, out of range of dialogue, toss the water sparkers at Raphael to make him disappear. Very important for later. We then head back to Joaquin's Rest to free Floric. Since I couldn't use weapons to break down the door, I had to toss the water sparkers at it. Yup, you're gonna be here a while, Floric. After too many minutes of torture, we free Floric, get the horn from Lump, and return to a Githyanki to deceive Voss and reach level 4. Now that our Drow disguise is no longer helpful, we take a level in Warlock to collect Shovel before respecing it to Tempest Cleric, as will be very powerful soon. For our feat, we take the Heavy Armor Master feat, reducing all non-magical damage by 3, and grab the Lifebringer from Blurg. This grants us 3 temporary hit points whenever we gain lightning charges, which will trigger frequently in combat. Now we just need to take on the Goblin leaders, and to prep for it, we created a massive water surface around the whole camp. We then began combat with several of the goblins, which, because the electric surface spread, pulled in a few others into the fight as well. But one thing you need to know about enemies in this game is that they don't sit still, which caused them to keep electrocuting themselves and die if they ever get below 4 HP. Our lightning charges is one of the few things that actually scales with electrocution damage, meaning electrocuted enemies take between 2 and 5 damage per round. If we are at 5 lightning charges, it deals an additional 1 to 8 damage. These are doubled if the target is wet, and that's the only way we can deal damage. This is also very dependent on our spell slots, so leveling up is essential, and so is long resting. We free Halsa next, and the normally rough fight to take on solo is trivial as the enemies just keep electrocuting themselves. Though it might seem powerful, I also want to point out that these fights take tons of time, and drain almost all my spell slots, if not all of them, every single fight. As when enemies die from Cull the Weak, they leave behind a surface of blood, which removes the electrified water surface there. Minthara does not fare any better, as after being kited for a dozen rounds she dies. Jor Ragson was a bit more difficult, but by constantly wetting him, we were able to take him out over a long period of time. With all the Goblin leaders dead, we return to the Grove and collect the parasite from the library for Ability Drain, a power that will be incredibly potent in Act 2. We head into the swamps and speak to Ethel, making sure to stock up. Ethel sells Hill Giant Strength Potions and water bottles, a very useful way to wet enemies. We need as many parasites as we can, so we head over to Flint and get the gnolls to attack the people in the cave, giving us time to cast Create Water all around the entrance. The gnolls did run straight through the shocked water and quickly finish the survivors. Once they were defeated, combat immediately begun with the gnolls, because the status of neutral to us was removed after Rugen died, and one of them immediately took lightning damage, aggroing all of them. Thankfully, they didn't have a chance to heal, and quickly died to the lightning. And after 15 minutes of kiting, Flint died as well, and we obtained the parasite from her corpse. We then head back into the Underdark, obtain Falar Aloof for its Shriek ability, and cross the boat into Grymforge. We immediately head over to Philomene and steal the barrel from her, as it will be our salvation for a completely different reason than you think. We want the adamantine splint, but to get it, we have to get one of the 2 mithril ores, which we do by drinking another invis pot to reach the mithril. Now we cannot actually beat Grim, but we don't need to beat the Grim fight, only start it. We waypoint up after dropping the hammer down, and have Scratch attack the valve to start the Grim fight. Now all we needed to do was drop the hammer, well out of Grim's line of sight, and collect the adamantine splint armor. After all of this, we were just short of level 5. We speak to Elder Brithvar, and free Nier, only to immediately attack him. The fight was way closer than anticipated, as the lightning hurt both the rebels and the absolutists. All 5 rebels died in the end. And after a long period of spamming Great Water, and even bringing in a few extras, Nier finally went down and we obtained the Parasite. We also collect some heavy chests in the Grymforge and send them to camp for later use. This got us level 5, unlocking level 3 spell slots, allowing us to upcast Great Water again, and also unlocks our permanent invisibility for Dwergar. We then return to Ethel for even more water bottles. After about 30 minutes of collecting potions and water bottles, we descend into Ethel's lair, skip past all the mass slaves, and using Invis, reach Mayrina. We use invisibility to free Mayrina, and all of our spells to create a massive water surface before beginning combat. Then, we retreated back up the walkways and lured the masked slaves to the poison clouds and electricity to take out 2 of them. But I ended up disengaging combat just to get my spell slots back by long resting, before returning to create even more water around Ethel's lair. This time, since her mass servants were gone, it would be easier. Now normally her legendary action would just overwhelm me with clones, but any clone summoned on electrified water immediately disappeared, and after a point, just wouldn't spawn period, allowing the fight to easily be won, thanks to Falar Louve's Shriek for extra damage. We make sure to extort Ethel for her hair and Mayrina, and put the free +1 to any stat into Constitution. Then we headed into Grymforge and into Act 2. This prompts Raphael to show up, and we desperately need his armor. Which brings up the question, how do we get it? The rules state that the only way I can deal damage is with the shock water effect, or any attack that uses the water sparkers. There just so happens to be a way to attack Raphael with the water sparkers, but we need Shadowheart, the silent spell, and the heavy chests I grabbed from Grymforge. The bonus action unarmed attack monks get is a kick that uses any equipped boots, but to get it you have to attack and hit something. This is why we needed the chest, as it reduces any damage it takes that is less than 22 to 0. By silencing Raphael, Shadowheart can attack the heavy chest, and use a bonus action to kick Raphael with the water sparkers. This trick, with kicking, would require me to have a massive chest in my inventory and would take forever for any enemy, so I decided to never use it. After bringing Raphael down to 0 HP, and using a non-lethal attack, we're able to collect the Helldusk armor. In the mountain pass, we enter the Kresh, and after getting every possible saving throw buff, use the Zaithis to give us the Awakened buff. We hand the artifact to the Ketheric and enter the Inquisitor's chambers, where we carefully and sneakily obtain the Gloves of Belligerent Skies from this chest, without being detected. I did also try to get the Blood of Lathander, which consisted of throwing my boots at the crystal 20 times, before I realized the next one was over a chasm. So no Blood of Lathander for me, at least not yet. We are nowhere near ready for the Kresh, so we use invisibility to sneak past the Death Shepherds and enter Act 2. Once there, we run over to Karnas, get him to drop his lantern and free the Pixie. We then head in the direction of Moonrise and help out Roland, and this is where one of the problems I had mentioned all the way back in the intro occurred. The 2 shadows are considered floating creatures, making them immune to status effects from surfaces. It took about 30 rounds of me chucking health potions at Roland, as him dying would have forced me to flee. But he was able to kill both shadows, and instead of going to Moonrise, we head to Garen Gothorm, giving her 5,000 gold to reach level 6. This granted us the Thunderbolt Strike passive, letting us knock back any creature we deal lightning or thunder damage to. We did still need 3 items to complete the build, and Lantarv sells one of them, Potions of Angelic Reprieve. I got a few and would return to him later. We head into Last Light, getting the Cloak of Protection and the Shade Clinger armor, which skyrockets our saves, and also obtain the Shield of Devotion for later. I spent the next 30 minutes covering all of Moonrise and Water before setting off to find the remaining 2 items I needed. The Gloves of Radiance can be obtained in the Potter's House in this chest, by carefully avoiding the mean locks. And after entering the Gauntlet of Shar and using a knock scroll on the vault door, we could obtain the Callous Glow Ring. This causes enemies to take 2 radiant damage when illuminated, and because of the Gloves of Radiance, they receive 2 turns of radiant orb, illuminating them and giving them a penalty to attack rolls. Because an electrocution damage triggers at the start of an enemy's turn, and the glow ring procs and everything, this allows the enemy to constantly get radiating orb. And finally, because of Thunderbolt Strike, enemies, when they take lightning damage, get pushed back into the lightning, taking even more radiant damage and lightning, causing some enemies to get knocked back 2 to 3 times. I started a fight in Moonrise, and even though every single card got eventually brought into combat, it didn't matter. The radiating orb meant they just couldn't hit me, and it didn't matter that it was literally 30 versus 1, because no one could even reach me to kill me. And if they did, they couldn't hit me. The only person we spared was Lantarv, and now was the time to purchase a shit ton of angelic reprieve potions.
You seek arms.
I used the rune powder barrel to take potions, level up a character,
You seek arms.
level up a hireling,
I seek a warrior worthy to bear.
get the potions.
You seek arms.
You know how Morgana Evelyn endlessly shopped with Quartermaster Tali, hearing that if you're alright by Jaheira, you're alright by me? Yeah, we found ours.
You seek arms.
After obtaining over 60 potions, we left Moonrise to take on a few more enemies we needed dead. I headed back into the Gauntlet of Shar to deal with the Justiciar and Balthazar, making sure to unequip the ring to not get destroyed by the Radiant Retort. We used a knock spell to open Balthazar's door, and he didn't last very long. Soon we were able to defeat both him and the Justiciar, thanks to some kiting. With him defeated, we said screw it to the self-same trial because the copy is considered to be a shadow, got the other gems, used the fly from my armor to fly down to the door, and open it with the other 3. Before this, I needed level 9 before taking on Ketheric, which would require me to kill all of Moonrise, all of the monsters in the Shadow-Cursed lands, everyone in the Kresh, and I even had to glitch into the Mind Flayer colony to get the final bit of XP for it. But this is where I discovered I had made a huge blunder. Entering the Mind Flayer colony triggers an autosave, and even though we use the Pixie Bell to leave the colony and go prepare for the Night Song, despite saving after that autosave, if you ever close the game and reopen it, the game will forcibly send you into the colony with the blessing active, regardless of if you saved afterwards, effectively hard-locking us in the colony, without any of the items we need to beat Ketheric. Not soft-locking, hard-locking. So we had to completely restart the whole challenge. Okay, I'm back, and at level 9, thanks to doing a lot more of the Act 1 quests, and there's a reason we need level 9. 6 levels go into Cleric for Thunderbolt Strike, another level goes into Fighter for Strength and Con save proficiency, as well as Defense, since Helldusk armor is bugged and counts as defense twice, giving us 28 AC, and the final 2 into Sorcerer for Font of Magic, allowing us to turn our spell slots into sorcery points. This is where the Shield of Devotion comes in handy, allowing us to get infinite level 1 spell slots, which can be turned into sorcery points. Watch this video for a more detailed explanation of how it works. We headed back into the Kresh, which was on high alert, even though we never spoke to the Inquisitor, and on the bridge began turning all the sorcery points into spell slots, and turning all those spell slots into sorcery points. This is why we needed the Potions of Angelic Reprieve, as drinking one restores all 1st and 2nd level spells, including any gained by creating more. Curiously, this doesn't actually work with Angelic Slumber Potions, so we kept constantly taking a nap, turning all the spell slots into sorcery points, and those into spell slots. We needed a few more things before spending literal hours getting spell slots. The first is the Blessmar Dream Guardian, so we have to fight the Inquisitor. He is a pushover, as nothing can hit us, except the Ardent spells, and everyone got so many stacks of Radiating Orb that I had to keep casting Create Water to shock them, because they just refused to attack me. They were defeated in just 14 rounds, and we obtained the blessing for a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. Also, I figured out that by casting Fly, we can actually reach the Blood of Lathander, though this doesn't feel like we should survive this flight. We then returned to the Myconid colony, and while we did deal with both Nier and the Dwergar, we didn't return to Spa and complete the quest, which we did now to get the Bliss Spores for a plus 1d6 to attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. We then speak to the 3 statues in the Shar and Sanctum, getting a plus 5 to Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma, to boost our saves to the moon, in combination with the Safeguard Shield, Ring of Protection, Cloak of Protection, Shade Clinger Armor, and proficiency in Strength and Con saves. It meant that unless we specifically crit fail a save, we'll succeed on it. We then free the Night Song, and obtain an elixir of Cloud Giant Strength, as the fight on the roof with Ketheric wasn't going to be easy. But now it was time to sit around, turning spell slots into sorcery points and vice versa, drinking potions of Angelic Reprieve to restore all of them for 3 straight hours. That should be plenty of spell slots. We talked Ketheric down with a letter from Melodia, and the fight began. But there was a massive problem. Ketheric has Legions of Bone, turning anything that dies into a skeletal egg. If any necromite dies close to him on electrified water, it creates an infinite loop of them spawning and dying, as any necromites that spawn apparently instantly die to Cull the Weak, creating an infinite loop of dying necromites. But with a bit of luck and a couple of attempts, we're able to get Ketheric down low enough to flee the battle, and we take pursuit, making sure to bring all of our items, a ton of health potions, and both the Ring of Flinging and the Gloves of Inhibited Kushigo. The colony was trivial, but this is where my problems finally caught up to me. Ketheric has Magical Plate, reducing all damage taken by 2, and while this wasn't a problem on the roof, Myrkul also has Magical Plate. Myrkul is also one of the 2 floating bosses, so lightning won't even work on him. This meant our only option was throwing boots at him. Bomb explosions would technically be cheating, as would endlessly burning Myrkul from Infernal Retribution. Throwing from heaven would work if I had more than one pair of boots to throw, and while I could get scrolls of telekinesis, the boots would get stuck under him, making it unable to be moved or picked up. Even throwing does no damage, as the 1 damage it deals is non-magical, and all of it is reduced by 2. I then spend the next 9 hours throwing shit at the wall to see what stuck, trying all the strategies mentioned prior, and even some found in other YouTubers' videos. But nothing worked. Ability Drain to Atrophied wouldn't work, as the Shadow deals damage when strength draining, talking Ketheric to death wouldn't remove Myrkul's Magical Plate, and the Night Song was about as useless as expected. But that's when we discovered 2 things that would be our salvation. The first is that Ketheric isn't actually hostile until speaking to him, and we have the Illithid Power Ability Drain, as well as a few other things that can affect him. I made sure to throw a Fire Resistance Potion next to Ketheric, so he wouldn't get infected by my Infernal Retribution. Then I summoned Scratch, and gave Scratch invisibility, to free the Night Song. I had to be careful as placing too much electric water could result in an infinite Necromite death loop, like I saw on the rooftop. There was a way to stop Ketheric from moving though. For some reason, Ketheric is immune to almost every crowd control spell, given he is undead and has a mutable form. But Flesh to Stone is not one of them. Now normally, around this level, you can't obtain it, but in my scroll shopping, I found a single Flesh to Stone scroll. I only had a 45% chance, and Ketheric has to make 4 saves, so this was truly a gamble. Gamblers quit before they hit big. Oh my god, that actually worked first try. We then freed the Night Song with Scratch, and dealt with the Necromites and Intellect Devourers by keeping them on their sides of the arena, so they wouldn't spawn an infinite number. To stay alive for as long as possible, I had a hireling, prior to entering the colony, cast Warding Bond on me, and drink an elixir of necrotic resistance, to take most of the damage off me, and equip the Periaptive Wound Closure, maximizing any health restored. Our saves from Bless, Bliss Spores, the Shade Clearer Armor, and Shar's Blessing meant that no spell or effect or Mind Blast could affect us, and our AC meant that basically nothing could hit us. Soon it was just Ketheric, me, and the Night Song. And though it took about 20 rounds of combat, Ketheric was defeated by the Night Song, and Myrkul arrived. The question now was how on earth could I damage Myrkul? Well, almost nothing scales with throwing boots, and despite having 27 strength, that doesn't add any damage. But both the Ring of Flinging and Gloves of Inhibited Kushigo add 1d4 damage to all thrown attacks. And they're one of the few things that actually works on everything thrown, even underwear. This would increase our damage from 1 to 3 to 9. Myrkul has resistance and reduces all damage by 2, meaning we now deal between 0 and 2 damage per throw. And this also reduces Myrkul's strength by 1 given our ability drain. Damage has successfully been acquired, even if it's awful. And oh, don't worry about the Necromites, because I certainly didn't. The Night Song got clapped by Myrkul, and we currently take so little damage from Myrkul, given our insane con saves. And this is why we need the millions of spell slots, as sometimes the Necromites will roll high enough to hit me. And since my other reactions don't really do anything, I can just use shield to take no damage. Eventually I was able to strength drain Myrkul to the point where he couldn't hit me with his melee attack, but he could use Gaze of the Dead on me, twice if I attacked him, once if I didn't. This was our strategy. Throw the Water Sparkers at Myrkul, occasionally dealing damage, pick them back up, occasionally move out of Myrkul's range to pop a health potion. But just when I thought this was going to be easy, I realized I was taking a lot more damage, and found out that the hireling that gave me Warding Bond had already died, forcing me to go through my health potions even faster. I was moving so little that the Necromites even started to form a battalion line, and none of them could hit me because of my crit immunity from the Grimskull Helm I decided to go back and get. Now all that was left was to chuck my boots at Myrkul till he died or I did. The boots also broke the game, and the ability drain stopped at 5 strength even though the stacks didn't. We were throwing boots at Myrkul for hours and it was painful. But then it happened 5 hours into this fight, and 14 hours attempting to beat this fight in total. I had to use a Globe of Invulnerability scroll, and watch in horror as the Necromites began sacrificing themselves to Myrkul to heal him. I had to watch 5 hours of progress and 110 combat rounds be erased in 3 minutes. So was this it? Was this impossible? Yes, it was impossible so long as they're necromites. But then it happened. He just stopped summoning them. Now that there were no more necromites, I healed the Night Song and could finally get a use of a spell that was useless till now, Fog Cloud. This level 1 spell creates a cloud of fog that blinds enemies in it for 10 turns. Myrkul is one of the 2 immobile enemies in the game, and we just so happen to have a ton of first level spell slots. We give the Night Song aid and a Cloud Giant Strength Elixir to allow her to do some decent damage to Myrkul. But when throwing my boots at Myrkul, I threw them a little too high and they got completely stuck under him. Telekinesis didn't work, and nothing else I did could get the boots out from under him, so it was all on the Night Song. It took tons of thrown health potions and 190 combat rounds, but she was defeating him, and soon, Myrkul fell to the Night Song. Yes! It's finally over. We grabbed the boots and got the ever-living hell out of the Mind Flayer colony that we spent 20 hours in. We brought Jaheira into our party before continuing down the road to Baldur's Gate. Now that Myrkul was defeated, we hit level 10 and respec'd into Tempest Clark 9 and Fighter 1 for another feat. We picked Tavern Brawler, which doesn't make sense now, but will make sense later. We got woken up in our sleep by some Gith, walked past all of them, and entered the Astral Plane. The fight with the Emperor was nowhere near as challenging as with Myrkul, but the Emperor is also affected by lightning water, as he was close to dying several times from it. It took me chucking health potions at him for several rounds to keep him alive. The Githyanki weren't that much of a threat, as once again we equipped the Gloves of Radiance and the Callous Glow Ring, making them basically unable to hit us. Eventually the Emperor was safe, and we accept the Astral Touch Tadpole, unlocking all the Illithid powers. Once arriving in Rivington, I made sure to head immediately over to Worm's Rock to speak with Gortash. Normally we would side with him, but instead we settled for just picking him up, bringing him to the cliff below Worm's Crossing. We made sure to cast Create Water everywhere, and then aggroed Gortash. His guards couldn't do anything, and he could do almost nothing to us, as he slowly died from electrocution. When he entered his second phase, I thought his legendary action would be bad, but it only triggers when he is targeted by an attack or spell, and the electrocution doesn't trigger it. Gortash would summon a fist, and attempt to use Tyrant's Binding every turn, but I could just move out of the fist's range, and I almost never failed to save against Tyrant's Bindings. It took all of my spell slots and tens of rounds of kiting Gortash, but finally he was electrocuted to death. We claim his Netherstone and head immediately over to Orin. We sneak past all the guards using invisibility, and because we're the Dark Urge, speak with Scleritus to enter the Temple of Baal. We need to duel Orin normally, in order to not aggro everyone in the temple. But how on earth were we going to be able to do enough damage to defeat Orin before she defeats us? Remember how I said that Strength modifier doesn't work with thrown boots? It just so happens that the Tavern Brawler feat adds the second Strength modifier to thrown attacks, even if the first one isn't added. This, in combination with the true throwing items, means we can deal between 10 and 18 damage with a single throw. Because we are throwing the Water Sparkers, we equip the Boots of Stormy Clamor to apply Reverberation on every throw. We do get feared by Orin's Piercing Growl, but since she uses Strength to attack, eventually she can't even hit us, and we defeated her to claim the final Netherstone. I made sure to go into Kazdor's palace and grab the Helmet of Grit from the chest before heading into the Morphic Pool to confront the Brain. We fail every check to dominate it, get saved by the Emperor, transform into a Mind Flayer, and shove him to make it leave us. We use invisibility to sneak past all the enemies and reach the Brain stem. Before climbing the stem, we make sure to reduce ourselves to under half HP, and immediately reach the Brain, using a Globe of Invulnerability before channeling Karsa's Compulsion, allowing us to enter and face the Brain. Of course, the Brain is the other mandatory floating boss in the game, and throwing won't work this time, as the Brain is directly over a chasm, so we'd have to kill the Brain with one singular throw of the boots. I actually attempted this challenge 7 months ago, and got all the way to the end, before realizing I couldn't destroy the Brain. I also skipped Myrkul in that one, by the way. But once again, the legend Bausch found a dumb way to destroy the Brain with the Helmet of Grit. Because Mind Sanctuary is very dumb, equipping and unequipping items costs absolutely no actions. So as long as we're less than half HP, we get an additional bonus action from equipping and unequipping the helm, which can be used to cast Fierce Perilous Stakes. With this, we'll have infinite actions so long as we never use our final one, and thus infinite damage. So after stacking over 30 Fierce Perilous Stakes, I carefully lined up the throwing angle, as there's a very small area where the Brain can get hit, and in one attack, destroyed the Nether Brain, beating the game with nothing but the Water Sparkers as my source of damage. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks to all the wonderful people that have been supporting the computer fund, including you if you made it this far in the video, because the longer you watch, the more it helps me out. Again, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, as I have some very exciting videos planned, and I'm trying to reach 10k subs before June. With your help, we can. But was this truly the worst item in the game? I mean, they beat the Netherrain in a single hit, and they beat Myrkul. Just kidding, the boots fucking suck.